Dateline Jerusalem, the news with Martin Lewis.
A desperate peace offer to Jesus, the rebel rabbi. The temple leaders plead, go back to Galilee. Is a military crackdown imminent? Governor Pilate arrives to take charge of security. The go-between, shuttle diplomacy between Bethany and the capital. Is the suspect traitor Judas now trying to broker a peaceful settlement? The men who gave it all up to follow Jesus. We name the 12-man executive of the Nazarene sect.
And why the preacher from Galilee says it's make your mind up time for sinners and the saved, and time is running out.
Good evening. It looks like being a race against time as Jewish leaders try to reach agreement with the agitators from Nazareth. As ever, our cameras are covering all the key locations in Jerusalem, including the Citadel, where Governor Pilate has arrived from Caesarea. That's where the chief priest Caiaphas, the head of the local Jewish council, is due to report to Pilate on the security situation during this critical Passover period. Meanwhile, frantic efforts are being made to defuse the outrage caused by the rebel rabbi's public statements. For the latest, over live now to David Jessel.
Yes, you join me at Pilate's headquarters, where the governor has just arrived after his trip down from his seaside palace at Caesarea. I understand that he has been receiving regular updates since the arrival of the Galilee group in town last Sunday. So far, I understand he has decided not to mobilize the security forces, calculating that that would be a provocative act. Meanwhile, the reports are reaching us that the people who caused all this trouble, Jesus and his followers, may in fact be leaving Jerusalem. They've been seen tonight in a field at Gethsemane on the edge of town, possibly preparing for a tactical withdrawal back north to Galilee. And now back to you, Martin.
Thanks, David. Well, if trouble flares up in Jerusalem, Pilate has a number of security options. If he judges that Caiaphas has lost control of the situation, he could mobilize the temple guard. The guard has the advantage of being local and so less provocative. In addition, Pilate has 500 or so Roman soldiers already in Jerusalem. But Roman soldiers on the streets at the historical feast of Passover would inevitably provoke trouble. If things get really out of hand, Governor Pilate can bring in the 3 legions stationed in Syria to finally quash any threat to the authority of Rome. Rome has been closely following events in the Middle East. Any challenge to stability in the main city of its eastern province could be interpreted as a challenge to the authority of the empire itself. Over now to our Rome Affairs correspondent, Dennis Toohey. Dennis, is this a major concern for Rome?
Yes, Rome is indeed concerned. But Rome would be even more concerned if Governor Pilate was forced to take the extreme step of mobilizing those Syrian forces. This would be an enormous logistical exercise, and it would reflect badly, in Rome's view, on Pilate's crisis management.
Dennis, would it be fair to say that Rome is already suspicious of Pilate because he was appointed by the traitor Sejanus?
Yes, you could say Pilate's days may already be numbered. His career hangs on how he manages this whole Jesus business in a way that keeps the Jews happy. Because since the imperial edict of a few months ago, decreeing tolerance and banning anti-Semitism, he knows that he mustn't upset the Jews. And the Jewish authorities do have the option of bypassing Pilate and appealing directly to the emperor. And that again would reflect badly on Pilate's competence.
Thanks, Dennis. Well, throughout the day, hopes of a non-violent outcome to the crisis have been kept alive by intense diplomatic efforts. On a day of non-stop shuttle diplomacy, here's Richard Lindley.
Early this morning, the first evidence of the Sanhedrin's bid to break the deadlock. An official delegation representing the chief priest seen leaving the city. It was headed towards a suburb of Bethany, where the Galilee group had set up its Jerusalem headquarters. The team of negotiators accompanying the mission showed how anxious the authorities are to defuse the crisis. I spoke to a political correspondent at the Jerusalem Post, a man who knows the mind of Caiaphas well.
Caiaphas does want compromise. Like Pilate, his job depends on a peaceful outcome to this crisis. But there are some hardliners in the council who are saying that these apparent blasphemies, be it the destruction of the temple or claiming to be the Messiah, don't go unpunished.
What about the tax issue?
Well, Jesus' intervention in the controversy over taxes paid to Rome certainly does raise the ante quite a bit.
The peace mission made its way to the house of Lazarus, a wealthy backer of the movement who claims that involvement with Jesus gave him a new lease of life. We can only guess at what was on the agenda: the threat of arrest, the offer of an olive branch. There was no word from inside the sealed Bethany compound of the Nazareth sect. Clearly there's a debate going on among the movement's central committee, the so-called Group of 12. Later, the delegation returned from Bethany to continue negotiation, this time, it's thought, accompanied by a representative of the movement. He's believed to be the movement's treasurer, Judas. As for the leader himself, it's not thought he's centrally involved in any of these discussions. According to sources inside the Bethany headquarters, Jesus is resigned to whatever Caiaphas, Pilate, or even his own Jewish God decides. This is Richard Lindley at Bethany.
You're watching Dateline Jerusalem on a day when hopes are growing of a breakthrough in the Passover crisis. Coming up later in the programme, the simple stories of country life that hold the real message of the rebel rabbi that time is running out. And the men who gave up a profitable business to follow a man whose business is prophecy. The threat to public security posed by the Nazareth rabbi has overshadowed the actual policies he's proposing. As we've heard, his preaching has attracted big crowds. So what's the message and what's the appeal? From Galilee, Linda Bryans.
He comes from the country. The people who listen to him are for the most part simple peasants. So his stories are told in simple everyday language, with the moral in images familiar to all. As you sow, so shall you reap. In other words, we've all got to take responsibility for our actions. Love your neighbour. Tough when they're the neighbours from hell. But it's all part of the basic philosophy, the so-called golden rule. Do unto others as you would be done to. And you have to make choices in life. And those life-defining choices make the difference between being one of the sheep or one of the goats. Simple homespun stories with a lack of sophistication, which the scribes and the chattering classes of Jerusalem might sneer at.
The distinction he's making between sheep and goats, it's not organizational, this is judgmental. There's a sense of impending crisis. There's a movement towards a cataclysmic explosion.
Here by the Sea of Galilee, the teaching of Jesus has caused little more than a ripple of concern for the authorities. Whether Jesus can keep his head above the water in the big city, or whether he even cares, we've yet to see. This is Linda Bryans in Galilee.
As we've heard, it's still not clear whether or not Jesus has drawn a line under his controversial activities and accepted the request from the chief priest Caiaphas that, having made his point, he should now go back home. Richard Lindley has been on the trail of the man and his followers.
To a press corps hungry for any tidbit of information, even a shopping expedition is food for speculation. This morning, members of the movement went out to buy provisions. And immediately, the media started guessing. Provisions for the 3-day trek back to Galilee, or one last supper together in Jerusalem. The followers and the grocers weren't saying anything. Later, the true meaning of the shopping expedition became clear, as the group were reported to be gathering in Bethany for a full meeting of Jesus and his 12-man inner circle. And this is the very room where the group held what was probably its last meal here in Jerusalem. According to those who were present, there was an air of finality about the occasion, a sense of, well, we've made our mark here, we certainly don't want to cause any more trouble at the Passover, and it's time to go home. This is Richard Lindley in Jerusalem.
And the latest news we have is that the group has been seen heading towards the outskirts of the city in the direction of the fields of Gethsemane, and we don't yet know how the authorities are going to react to that. But I'm told we can go over live now to the governor's residence, where Caiaphas' spokesman has just emerged. Let's see what he has to say.
I can tell you on that particular point.
Are you going to arrest him before he leaves the city?
I'm afraid I can't comment.